So this is neither a apologism for racist, nor is it a woke rant. Even though I do intend on getting some jabs in about racism later on here, but so this is kind of like a piggyback video on the previous one that I did about uh, that a lot of people were saying that Boston is a racist city. So, and I mentioned before because I've enjoyed my time in Boston, uh, and my wife has enjoyed her time in Boston, and she's African American. I thought I mentioned that in that previous video, but I guess I didn't. So that was kind of an important piece about the whole point of that video. But just a little refresher. So apparently, there have been many black athletes who have said that they've been called the N word by Boston fans when they play in Boston, and also many black visitors have said that they felt unwelcome there. So, and also I feel like neither of us, my wife or I, have had felt unwelcome there. But so this is not to negate or minimize other people's experiences, but um, that just wasn't our experience in particular. And also, I've seen plenty of similar racism elsewhere, not just in Boston, but many of the things that they were saying happens in Boston, like mostly microaggressions, uh, like people of color feeling like uh, they're ignored, or kind of this stuff like holding your purse when you see a black man, for example. So these are kind of like not unique to any particular places, but it's kind of something that unfortunately happens everywhere. And also, other arguments were that there's a lot of segregation and racial inequality in Boston, which is also true of most or many places. This is typically true in um, formerly industrial cities, the places where um, during the Great Migration, where black families had left the South because of racial violence and look for factory jobs or industrial jobs in northern cities like Boston, Boston, Philadelphia, New York, um, Chicago, Cleveland, Minneapolis, Cleveland, these kind of places. Uh, these are cities that formerly had were big in manufacturing and industrial factory jobs in the late 1800s, early 20th century, and after World War II. Boston is kind of interesting here, where so majority of the people that were doing migrating to northern cities, they were mostly going to places like New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, and not very many people actually went to Boston. That didn't really happen until after World War II. So a lot of these industrial efforts were kicked up during World War II for war production. So that may have caused black people to move into Boston, whereas before there weren't very many people going into Boston. So compared to other cities like New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Cleveland, Minneapolis, um, or Cincinnati, these kind of places, Boston has comparatively lower percentage of the population that is black. For example, Philadelphia is 40% black, whereas Boston's only 25% black, which is still significant, but not as high as places like Philadelphia or Chicago. But yeah, so there's in all these cities, uh, they have said that when black people moved to the northern cities, they experience a lot of uh, yeah, basically, yeah, a lot of backlash and violence, uh, discrimination, all that happened in all these places, uh, and that has caused a lot of very deep segregation. Or part of the segregation is like the redlining, whereas black people weren't allowed to get home loans, or if they were able to get home loans at all, in places where white people were able to get home loans. So that's why um, uh, in these cities, the majority of black communities today were the only places back in the day when there was housing discrimination, where they were only allowed to live in, basically because they couldn't get loans or rent any place outside of these places. So so there's that segregation piece that's true in all these cities, and unfortunately, with the stories of these cities, with the Civil Rights Act and the housing discrimination becoming illegal in the 1960s, is already the beginning of the decline of manufacturing. So whereas before black people weren't able to get the better paying jobs in these factories, and they were denied union membership to negotiate their pay. So they kind of got the, the short end of the stick, and all these places where they were previously stuck in because they were basically by law not able to buy or rent anywhere else. They came to where they couldn't, even if it were legal, they couldn't afford to move out of these places. So that's why we still have like this heavy segregation today. And also a common thing. So this is the piece where I said I don't want to be mistaken as being a racist apologist, but in all these cities there are also white ethnic enclaves. So like all the Italians lived in one part of town, all the Irish lived in one part of town, all the Polish lived in another part of town. So this is because as these groups were also moving in during the Industrial Revolution, or when they had these factory jobs, when they moved to the U.S., they were also discriminated against. A lot of violence were directed at these groups as well. So basically, they decided to all live amongst themselves for protection, and also to try to avoid the violence directed at them. So which is to say that when these were people came in from European immigrants from Italy, Ireland, Poland, they were all discriminated against when they got here. Um, so I mean, this isn't like a case of like who had it worse, but yeah, it was faced by them also. And so I think, particularly with um, the violence uh, and uh, racial conflicts faced by black people when they came to the northern cities, is that like the immigrant groups that were established there felt like when the black people were coming up, that they were a competition and they're going to take their jobs. Kind of similar to what's going on with what they're saying about the immigrants coming over and taking people's jobs today. There was a similar sentiment back then with the Great Migration of black people moving to northern cities. And I'm certain there was the additional racial element too, as our country has a very long uh, sordid history with race. Um, so so there's a piece like where every time there's a newcomer, they newcomer groups, they've always faced discrimination and violence, and perhaps there was a bit more to it with the racial piece added. But um, so again, So these were actions that came out of fear. They were afraid of that we have competition and they're going to take our jobs, those sort of feelings. So that created a lot of racial animosity between groups. So at the same time, even though this is true, um, we know for a fact that black people have experienced particular additional discrimination due to skin color, where again they were unable uh, to have union membership in the factory jobs. They were prevented from living in places that had closer proximity to jobs, places with that had increasing property value and more resources. They were barred from these places because of the color of their skin, and then because even when discrimination became illegal, because they were prevented opportunities in union membership and the better paying jobs, they were not in a financial place where they couldn't move out even if they wanted to, because when it became legal. And there's a story of how each immigrant group came to the States with nothing. They worked for it. But one thing that happened during uh, post World War II is we had um, these home loans. Home loans that were given primarily to white people, and so again the whole thing with the redlining where banks wouldn't loan to black people. So these were the low interest home loans afforded by the Fair Housing Act post Great Depression, World War II era. They were only afforded to white people, uh, and this had a very strong or huge effect on the creation of the middle class. This was a time with strong high union membership, where they were able to negotiate better pay, whereas black people were denied membership in unions. And also there was the GI Bill for white soldiers that came back, even though technically black soldiers were able to get the GI Bill, but the schools, colleges didn't honor it, so they couldn't really. Most black soldiers could not use the GI Bill to get education, and they could not get the home loans. So this created or added to the um, the the racial disparities or racial inequality that occurred from that. So yes, so there are certainly um, negative effects that due to the way that the laws were enforced that negatively affected black Americans, but this isn't true in just Boston, it's true basically in the whole country. And there's, uh, yeah, so I mean, again, based on people's experiences, people may feel more unwelcome in Boston for some reason, but I feel like this is kind of the case with most places in the U.S. Perhaps the reason may be is because, like, of these cities, being that Boston's only 25% black, uh, and more people there are. So Boston, even though it is, so today there's more people of color compared to white people in the city proper of Boston. White people make less than 50% of Boston now, but compared to these other cities, Boston is comparatively a whiter city. So perhaps the similar kind of microaggressions and like basic American racism that you see anywhere may be, I guess, more visible, I guess, possibly in places that are more white. So maybe that's part of the explanation, but um, in places like the Northeast, you don't see a lot of like overt racism, but certainly the kind of microaggressions and uh, similar struggles that Black Americans face in the whole of the country, which is not unique to Boston or any place for that matter. Um, so again, this is not being a racial apologist. These are all things that need to change and that are horrible, and it's unfair. So yeah, this is something that needs to be fixed, not just in Boston, but everywhere, the whole country.